Answered in kind. 48. The kingdom within and the law of coherence. Let us begin without superstition. Let us begin without threat. Let us begin without the cheap scaffolding of fear, shame, and guilt that has so often been stapled onto the sacred and called religion. Because what has been mistaken for divine punishment, in many cases, simply misinterpreted cause and effect. And what has been called hell is often nothing more than the nervous system trapped in its own unexamined repetitions. There exists within every human being a principle older than doctrine and more exacting than dogma, the thought-feeling continuum. Every thought you rehearse, every emotional current you indulge, every intention you emit into the vivid atmosphere of relational life participates in a lawfulness. Not moralistic lawfulness, not celestial bookkeeping, structural lawfulness. Action generates consequence. Attention sculpts perception. Emotion organizes interpretation. Repetition engraves circuitry. This is karma, stripped of mystification. Karma is not cosmic retribution, it is coherence. And maybe as well, the absence of it. Consider the phenomenon of psychological projection. When an individual cannot tolerate an impulse, a shame, a hostility, or an envy within themselves, the psyche performs a subtle transference. The internal becomes externalized. The unowned becomes attributed. The shadow is displaced onto another. This is not malevolence, it is defense. Yet, defense has consequence. The amygdala, that ancient sentinel of the limbic citadel, scans for threat with ruthless efficiency. When unresolved emotion resides within the organism, the amygdala becomes sensitized. Ambiguity feels dangerous. Novelty feels unsafe. Difference feels adversarial. The internal charge ignites perception. Then projection furnishes the narrative. You are angry. You are corrupt. You are the problem. The psyche achieves temporary relief, but at what cost? The world begins to mirror the distortion. Others respond defensively. Relationships constrict. Isolation accumulates. The original internal tension is reinforced. This is karma operating through neurobiology, not punishment. Pattern. And so we arrive at heaven and hell. Heaven has been painted as celestial reward, hell as infernal torment. But, experientially, heaven resembles coherence, a regulated nervous system, an integrated psyche, a heart unarmored by perpetual vigilance. Hell resembles chronic threat activation, shame fused with identity, resentment perpetually recycled, projection perpetually enacted, validation perpetually sought and never sufficient. Hell is not necessarily fire. It is fragmentation. Heaven is not necessarily clouds. It is integration. When fear-based religion tells a child, do this or burn, the amygdala learns that existence itself is precarious. The organism becomes organized around threat avoidance. Morality becomes synonymous with survival. Intuition is distrusted. Curiosity is policed. Shame becomes structural. But shame does not produce coherence. It produces concealment. Fear does not produce love. It produces compliance. And compliance is not transformation. There are those who cling so desperately to positivity that they bypass peace entirely. They chase exaltation, affirmation, applause, spiritual ecstasy, moral superiority, anything to avoid stillness. Happiness is a spike. Peace is a baseline. Happiness excites dopaminergic reward circuits. Peace stabilizes autonomic equilibrium. If one has been raised in chaos, calm may feel like vacancy. If one has been raised in conditional approval, silence may feel like abandonment. So the individual continues to touch the electric fence, zap, and then blames the fence for being electrified. But boundaries are not punishments. They are structural realities. When you transgress another's boundary, you encounter resistance. Not because the universe is vindictive, but because coherence requires mutual respect. To live without emotional intelligence is to wander through a field of invisible fences while insisting that the world is hostile. To live without discernment is to mistake your own projections for external attack. And so the cycle perpetuates. Some inherit chains so familiar they feel like heirlooms. Intergenerational fear, unprocessed grief, cultural narratives of threat, family myths about safety and conformity. The child learns familiar equals safe, unknown equals danger, even if the familiar is misery. When the warm guidance of the heart whispers, there is more, the amygdala counters, there is risk, and the body chooses safety, or what it has been conditioned to label as safety. Thus, repetition compulsion becomes destiny, not because heaven has withheld reward, not because hell has been decreed, but because the neural architecture has not been examined. Where you focus, there you are. Attend perpetually to grievance, and grievance becomes your perceptual filter. Rehearse narratives of betrayal, and betrayal becomes hypervisible. Fixate on validation, and your identity becomes hostage to applause. The brain is plastic. Repetition strengthens pathways. The thought you rehearse becomes easier to think. The emotion you indulge becomes easier to feel. This is karmic inscription in neural tissue. The arc of your thought-feeling expression bends toward the architecture you reinforce. If you emit hostility, you cultivate environments that respond defensively. If you emit respect, You cultivate environments capable of reciprocity. Not always immediately, not always perfectly, but structurally. Coherence is not instantaneous reward. It is long arc alignment. Many ask, when will I receive my reward for being good? But goodness performed for reward is transaction, not coherence. And many who are bitter and cutting wonder why warmth never finds them. Yet bitterness repels warmth. The field responds to the frequency broadcast. This is not mystical fatalism. It is relational physics. True spiritual freedom is not rebellion against structure. It is alignment with it. It is the reclamation of inner authority. It is the refusal to outsource discernment to fear-based systems that equate control with righteousness. It is the courage to tolerate uncertainty long enough for the prefrontal cortex to modulate the amygdala's alarm. It is the discipline to pause before projecting. It is the humility to own one's thought before condemning another's character. It is the audacity to say, this feeling is mine, let me metabolize it. And in that metabolization, the chain weakens. Heaven and hell, then, are not postponed destinations. They are cumulative experiential consequences of coherence or incoherence. If you repeatedly choose projection over ownership, fear over curiosity, validation over integrity, you generate fragmentation. If you repeatedly choose awareness over reaction, regulation over eruption, respect over intrusion, you generate integration. Break the pattern today, or the circuitry wires deeper tomorrow. This is neither threat nor prophecy. It is neuroplasticity. The so-called kingdom within is not a metaphorical province of piety. It is the integrated organism, cognition, emotion, intuition harmonized. It is the place where thought and feeling are congruent, where intention and action are consonant, where respect for self and respect for other coexist, where you no longer touch the fence and blame the field. You learn the structure, you move within it gracefully, and in that grace, peace emerges, not as reward, as resonance. So let us discard the pitiful distortion that religion was meant to terrorize the psyche into obedience. The sacred was never about coercion. It was about coherence. The arc of your expression, every thought entertained, every emotion cultivated, every intention launched into the vivid atmosphere, returns not as punishment, but as pattern. If the pattern is painful, adjust the premise. If the repetition is barren, alter the focus. Responsibility is not condemnation, it is empowerment. To say, my thought participates in the world, is not self-blame, it is creative sovereignty. You are not damned by decree, you are shaped by repetition. You are not saved by compliance. You are liberated by integration. The electric fence is not malicious. It is conductive. Respect the boundary, and there is no shock. Touch it unconsciously, and there is consequence. Learn the field, and you walk it without fear. And so, whether heaven or hell exist as metaphysical realms becomes secondary. The more urgent question is, are you coherent? Are your thoughts aligned with your declared values? Are your emotions owned or projected? Are you listening to the warm guidance of the heart or retreating into inherited fear because it feels familiar? Peace is possible, not as ecstatic climax, as steady luminosity, not as denial of darkness, as integration of it. Break the pattern now. Assume responsibility for the thought you rehearse. Choose coherence over compulsion. Choose integration over projection. Choose peace over performance. And the dim corridors will not need to be condemned. They will simply be illuminated. And remember, no matter where you place your attention, you will always be answered in kind.